So this is the second photosynthesis lesson, and to start with we're going to answer and correct our questions from the last lesson. So in the last lesson you had 5 or 6 questions with mistakes in them, or statements with mistakes in them, and you had to spot the mistake and correct it. So I want you to get out your red pen and to mark it. If it's correct, give it a tick. If it's wrong, put a cross against it, and then put your corrections in. So, question A, the vacuole contains a substance called cytoplasm. That's incorrect. The vacuole does not contain cytoplasm. Instead, it contains cell sap, which is a sugary water substance. Instead, if you maybe wrote something to do with the cytoplasm being outside of the vacuole, that's also correct. There's various ways you could have disproved that, but the vacuole itself contains a thing called cell sap, which is like sugary water. Part B, animal cells have a cell wall, a nucleus and cytoplasm. The mistake there is, there's 2 mistakes in fact. The animal cells do not have a cell wall, so this bit's incorrect. They do have a nucleus, and there is no such thing as cytoplasm. What there should have been is cytoplasm. So 2 mistakes there in that second one. Okay, part C, chloroform is a green substance found in plants. 1 mistake here, it's not called chloroform, it's called chlorophyll. Watch your spelling with this one because it's a hard one to spell. Okay, the last few. A cell is held together by a cell surface counterplane. It's not called a cell surface counterplane, it's called a cell membrane. So that was the mistake there. Part E, the cell wall is used for storage. It's not used for storage, it's for protection or support. Either of those 2 terms is its main function. Part F, the cytoplasm controls the cell. The cytoplasm doesn't do that, the nucleus does that. You could have said instead that the cytoplasm is where the reactions happen in the cell, or it provides support for the shape of the cell. But if you're talking about which component controls the cell, it's the nucleus. Okay, this is the second set of questions that you did last lesson. I want you again to mark these. Again, use a red pen. These were the easier questions on the worksheet I gave you. So there was the easier and the harder ones. These are the easier ones. If you were doing the harder ones, you can still use these answers here to help guide you with marking your harder answers. So, question 1, plants get food from the soil. That's false. Plants get food from the leaves through the process photosynthesis. Part 2, plants make food in their green leaves. That is true, through the process of photosynthesis, as we've just said. Part 3, water gives the plant the food it needs. That's not true. Water and food are different components or different substances in the plant. They don't come from one another. Water will come from the likes of rain or by watering a plant, and when you water a plant, you always water the soil around it because the water enters the plant via the roots. Part 4, it is the green chemical in leaves that helps make the food. That is true. That green chemical is chlorophyll. That's found inside chloroplast. When we looked at the plant cell, we saw those green round organelles, and they are known as chloroplasts. They contain the chlorophyll, one of the components needed for photosynthesis. Part 5, to make food, a plant needs oxygen. That is false. To make food, a plant needs carbon dioxide. It produces oxygen, and we're going to look at that today. Part 6, chlorophyll is green. That is true. Part 7, photosynthesis makes chlorophyll. That is false. Chlorophyll is needed for photosynthesis. It doesn't get produced in photosynthesis. Part 8, photosynthesis is when the plant makes food in its leaves. That is true. Part 9, a plant needs water to make food. That is also true. So we need 2 components. 4 separate components. Remember we said sunlight was one, chlorophyll was another, carbon dioxide is another, and water is the final one. Question 10, a plant gets food from the sun. That's false. The plant needs sunlight to make the food, but it doesn't come from the sun. Question 11, sunlight is needed for photosynthesis. That's absolutely true. Question 12, the speed of photosynthesis is always the same in a leaf. That is false. And we're going to look at different factors that might change the speed of photosynthesis in a leaf in coming lessons. Part 13, the speed of photosynthesis depends on the temperature. That is true. That is one of the factors that affects the speed of photosynthesis. If you increase the temperature, you will increase the speed of it. If you decrease the temperature, you'll decrease the speed of it. Question 14, it needs to be warm for photosynthesis to take place quickly. That is true. So, in this part of the lesson, you are going to apply what you learned in the previous lesson to create the full word equation for photosynthesis. So we looked at what goes in to make photosynthesis occur. We're going to look at what gets produced today. And we're also going to look at how glucose is stored in the plant, in what form. Okay, so the next activity is for you to use your knowledge of photosynthesis and add in the correct details into the table below. So you're going to have to draw another table. Here are your headings: raw materials, things we need, products. Products is another term in science for what we get at the end of a reaction. The raw materials and things we need, they're very similar, they're very interchangeable, so I will allow, even if you put one of these factors in the wrong, one of these substances in the wrong category, I don't mind if they're in the wrong one for the first 2 columns. The important differences is between the first 2 columns and then what gets produced. And these pictures are clues as to the different substances that you'll put in these different columns. So stop the video, do that now, and then restart once you're finished. Okay, this is the answers to that table. The raw materials that get used to let photosynthesis occur are carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. Things we need, sunlight as well, and chlorophyll. I don't mind so much if you've got those in different columns, if you've swapped them about a little bit, as long as they're not in the products column. The things that get produced in photosynthesis are glucose and oxygen. That is it. Glucose is the food that we were talking about. The whole purpose of photosynthesis is to make glucose, which is our type of, the plant's type of food. And we're going to look a bit more about that in a minute. Make sure to mark your answers there. Okay, now based on that last activity, I want you to try and make your own equation for photosynthesis without looking at it. So use these pictures to determine the things that will go in for photosynthesis to occur, and then what comes out as a result. What are our products? 2 of these, obviously there's 4 things that are needed for photosynthesis to occur. 2 of them will go to the left of the arrow. 2 of them will go above, the other 2 will go above and below the arrow. And then the 2 products will go to the right. See if you can do that. Stop the video and then restart once you're done. Okay, we'll see if you were correct. So this is the equation for photosynthesis. You have carbon dioxide and water that go in. They are what's known as your reactants. Light and chlorophyll are needed, but they don't go in the body of the equation at the start with carbon dioxide and water. They go above and below the arrow. And then the products are glucose and oxygen. Can you please make sure your equation is correct? You will need to know that equation off for your exams. As it says there, glucose is the food for the plant. Making glucose is the whole purpose of photosynthesis. The plants don't care so much about making oxygen. It's a benefit to humans because obviously we need oxygen to breathe. But the main purpose for photosynthesis for them is to make glucose, to make their food. So that's the key bit for this. Okay, now what I want you to do is a fill in the blanks activity here. I want you to write out in your books the paragraph down here and fill in the blanks using the words up above. Remember, with filling in the blanks, use a different colour pen or underline the word you're putting in. Stop the video, restart once you're done. We will go over answers to this next lesson for this activity. Okay, so now on to the second part of this lesson, which is what happens to glucose once it gets made. So, what would you do if you saw lots of loose paper money on the floor right now? What would you do with it when you got home? Would you just leave it where it is on the floor? Would you bundle it together? I know if it was all loose money around my house, I would collect the money together and put it into bundles and then store it in the likes of a bank, because obviously I don't want it to be stolen, and that way it's somewhere safe to keep it. And there's a similar thing that happens to glucose. So we're just looking in the red box first of all here. Plants make glucose, but glucose is like loose money. What if the plant doesn't need to use that glucose? What then happens is plants turn the glucose into starch in the yellow box. Starch can be stored away for when the plant needs to use it. There should be an S on the needs there. So what I want you to do is to copy that sentence in the yellow box down into your books. So glucose is a bit like loose money. It needs to be stored in another form called starch to keep it safe and to prevent it going missing in the plant. Okay, a plant makes use of the glucose produced by photosynthesis, starch for storage, protein for growth, and cellulose for the cell wall. So they can use glucose for various different things in the plant. We're going to look more into that next lesson as well. Can you take that red box down in your books, please? Plants also need minerals such as nitrates and phosphates. They get these from the soil through their roots. So not only does water get absorbed from the roots, from the soil, but also minerals as well. And those minerals, depending on the mineral type, will have a different function in the plant. Okay, final question of the lesson. I want you to choose a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Choose carefully because you're going to be answering the question behind that number on the next slide. Okay, here's your 6 questions. Whatever number you picked, you must answer that question in your book. Doesn't need to be a very long answer, brief answer is fine. Once you've done that, that is the lesson over. Make sure to upload your work on Google Classroom.